So I want to talk to you guys about befriending your brokenness. So this is interacting with your brokenness probably in a different way than you've ever done before. Let me tell you my story. So I started to understand sometime in 2011 that my identity, which I've been searching for all my life at that point, right? My value, my significance, who I am, is the beloved of God. I am loved by God. Your identity, get this guys, your identity doesn't change based on what you do. Okay? It doesn't change based on what happens to you. Your identity just is. For example, I bought a Honda Civic, I think 10 years ago, okay? I bought a Honda Civic 10 years ago. It was a Honda Civic then, and it's still a Honda Civic now. Now, it doesn't work as well now, all right? There are things that have changed about the car, but it's still what it was when it was made, all right? And what God says that you and I are His beloved, His loved ones, His sons and His daughters. So I knew I was beloved. Now, I also knew when I found that out in 2011 that I was broken. And that's kind of why I found it out, because I was broken, okay? Some things had happened in life, some difficult things. And I had gone to this men's retreat, and I had heard some other men talk who were also broken or had been broken, were living through their brokenness, walking through it. And they said, you're the beloved. And yes, you're broken. Okay, so I knew I was a beloved, broken. Then I thought, I'm the beloved, broken. And I understand the brokenness too, because, the Bible says that, we die with Christ, right, in His death on the cross, but then we're raised up with Him to a whole new life. Or Romans 8:17 says that if we want to share in His glory, we've also got to share in His suffering. So I understood that. But I thought it was the beloved, broken, to be made whole. I was like, okay, that's okay. I'm the beloved. That's great. I've been broken. Okay, I get that happens. But what I'm looking towards, my hope, where I'm going to, even in this life, is to be made whole, to have life, to be renewed, restored, all these things. And God does want to do that, but I believe it's in a different way than you and I typically understand it. Now what I understand is I am the beloved, broken, so that God can be given through me to a world desperate to be loved, to be loved, all right? I am the beloved, broken, so God can be given through me to a world desperate to be loved. Now listen, this is a different way to think of our brokenness than most people probably ever have. Here's the deal. When I'm broken, not that I go and look for it, by the way, but when it happens, and it's going to happen, it's going to continue to happen in this imperfect world, let's just imagine the cracks in the armor, the cracks in the body, right? The cracks in the spirit of life, right? That we carry, that we are, get wider, right? That's brokenness, right? The cracks get wider. The wider the brokenness is, the wider the crack is, the more of God can flow through us to the world around us, that is also broken, needing to know that they're the beloved. Yes, they are broken. And now God is being given through me, right? His perfect love, the beloved, right? His perfect love is being given through me to people desperate to be loved. They get filled up, and it's able to come into them because they've got cracks as well, right? The beauty of my brokenness is God can be given through me. The beauty of their brokenness is God can come into them. And when God fills them up, He can flow right back out through them to the rest of the world. There's two passages of scripture I want to share with you related to this. The first is Genesis 50:20. This has got to be a life verse. Now listen, this is Joseph talking. And many of you know the story of Joseph. He is someone who truly understands that he's the beloved, and he understood that from the very beginning. I mean, listen, he got the coat of many colors. He had the dreams that said that he would be a prince and people would serve him and even bow down to him. He knew, he was confident in his belovedness. And he was also broken many times. He was beaten up by his brothers. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was a slave in Potiphar's house. Then he was falsely accused. He was thrown into jail. Then, he came out of jail, but then his brothers show up and they're looking for food, and that has to bring back old wounds and memories. Okay, so he is broken many times in in significant ways, not just in small ways, in really extreme ways, Joseph is broken. And every time in his brokenness, he does not choose to be the beloved, broken, to figure out a way to be made whole, to hope with all his might, focus on self. God, look, I'm broken here. Look at the big crack in me. Will you please heal it? No. Instead, in every situation, he serves really well. In every situation, he loves really well. In every situation, he is listening really well. He's trying to help other people. He is blessing other people. He blesses eventually an entire nation. And then when his brothers come and say, we need food, our family is dying, they don't know that he's Joseph. He runs away weeping, because he realizes these are his brothers. He's not weeping because they hurt him so badly. He's weeping because he's finally been reunited, and he sees a path to even be reunited eventually with his father. What does he do? He gets the best land in all of Egypt, not just for his father, but his brothers, the one who beat him up, betrayed him, sold him into slavery. He takes care of their families, their wives, their children, all of them, right? And he says in Genesis 50:20, to his brothers, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. Do you feel, beloved, in your brokenness, that God has allowed you to come to this position to save the lives of many people? That is the thinking that someone has if they understand they're the beloved, broken, for God to be given through them to a world desperate to be loved. But if you're only thinking of self, if you're thinking, I'm the beloved, sure, I guess I kind of believe that. But I'm broken, I'm so broken, and all I can think about is me not being broken anymore. Then guess what? You're not going to have the possibility in your life for God to who has brought you to that position or allowed you to come to that position to use you to save the lives of many people. You're not going to be able to say to the devil, you meant this to harm me. But God has used it for good. Now, here's the last verse. It's Romans 8:30 and 31. To me, this has got to be, potentially this has got to be Paul's favorite 2 verses ever. And here's what Paul said. Paul, can you imagine Paul ever being like stooped, ever being like dumbfounded, not knowing what to say? This is the time. Paul says, and having chosen them, so God has chosen us, he called them to come to him. So Paul's saying we're his beloved. He chose us. He called us to come to himself. We're his beloved. And having called them, he gave them right standing with himself. How did the right standing happen? It happened through Jesus' death on the cross. And we died with him. We share in that death. Okay? So that's the brokenness. We're the beloved, broken. And having called them, he gave them right standing with himself. And having given them right standing, he gave them his glory. So he says, so we're the beloved. He called us. He chose us. And we're broken. He gave us right standing with himself. Paul says earlier in Romans 8:17, if we're going to share in his glory, we're also going to share in his suffering. Paul also says that when we died at Christ, we're raised up with him to a whole new life. Okay, that's how we're in right standing through this brokenness. He says, then from this brokenness, or because of this brokenness, God pours into us his glory. His glory is not just a bright shining light. His glory is his essence. His glory is who he is. His glory is his love. God is love. What Paul starts to understand is what Joseph understood. Paul understands that we are loved by God. Our identity is unshakable. We have been broken, because of our humanity, because of our sin, because of this world. But through our brokenness, God pours into us, through those cracks in us, his glory, who he is, his love. And he fills us, and it's not just supposed to stay there. It flows out to the rest of the world. And Paul finds this so incredible. His next sentence is this: what shall we say about such wonderful things as these? Paul says, I don't even know what to say about this. Paul's like, my mind is just, Paul's like, my mind has just been blown. When have you ever known Paul to be at a loss for words? Paul at this point is in Romans chapter 8. He's been writing to these Roman people for a long time at that point, and yet at that point he pauses. And I think when he says, what more can we say? I mean, if we're the beloved, broken, and through our brokenness, he gives all of himself to us, and through us, he can be given to a world desperate to be loved. What else is there? I'm dumbfounded. I'm shocked. I'm amazed. I'm floored. And I think at that point, he took a pause. Maybe it was 10 minutes. Maybe it was 30 minutes. Maybe it was a day. Maybe it was 30 days. I don't know. But I think at that moment, he had to just go, I've got to meditate on this, God. I've got to hear from you more on this, God. I've got to understand, what does this mean practically for my life and for the Romans' lives and for all followers of the way and their lives? And then God gives them the answer. The same verse, 8:31. What shall we say about such wonderful things as these? Here it is. If God is for us, who can ever be against us? If God is for us, who can ever be against us? What he's saying is the same thing that Joseph said to his brothers. What Satan intended for evil, God used for good. He used this position. He brought me to this position. He allowed this brokenness to happen so that I could save the lives of many people. What Paul is saying, if God is going to do this in our lives, and we're the beloved, broken, so that he can be given through us to a world desperate to be loved, then no one can harm us. And I'll tell you why. Because if anyone comes against us and creates more brokenness in our life, more upheaval in our life, pain in our life, if disease comes against us and creates pain and brokenness and challenge in our life, right? If we do something wrong, not that we should, but if we do, if there's brokenness, okay, we should befriend the brokenness and admit our brokenness and say, okay, whoa, that was wrong. That broke me. That is a breaking thing. But then he's saying, guess what? If we're broken and broken more, then the more we can receive because the crack is wider, and the more he can flow through us because the crack is wider, there's less of us getting in the way of God, his glory that is being given to us, flowing into us and flowing out of us. So he can say like Joseph can say. He realized like Joseph realized. That's okay, brothers. You did something that broke me, but I always hung on to my belovedness. I always knew I was the beloved, even through the brokenness. And therefore, through the brokenness, I came in contact with people who were desperate to be loved. Because I knew I was the beloved, he was able to flow through me as the cracks were even made wider and wider and wider. As Potiphar's wife falsely accused me, as I was in jail, as I was here serving the people of Egypt, and then my brothers who acted against me showed up and broke my heart again, though it broke because of what they did, but also broke because I love you. And I know ultimately, ever since you sold me into slavery, I know you were desperate to be loved. Friends, if we can think of our brokenness differently, if we can understand we're the beloved, broken, not to be made whole. I'm not saying one day we won't be made whole. I'm not saying that God doesn't make us whole now. What I'm saying is the less of us, the more of him. What I'm saying is the more broken we are, the more there is to give. Listen, last thought. Bread in the store, most bread is sold in slices. Okay, Jesus, it says, when he fed the 5,000 and at the Last Supper and after the walk to Emmaus with those two disciples, it says he took the bread. He blessed it. So it's the beloved, right? The choosing it, right? The blessing of it. And then it says he broke the bread and then he gave it, right? He didn't break the bread and then say, now how do I get it back together and make it whole again, right? No, bread comes in slices, right? Broken bread means more bread for more people, okay? It means more people can eat, right? So we're the beloved, broken, for God to be given through us to a world desperate to be loved. It's not that we go out and look for our brokenness. Okay, it's not that we go out and make a bad decision just so we can be more broken. No, but when difficult things happen to us, okay, even when we make bad decisions, okay, when people treat us wrongly, when, like me and my wife, you have 2 kids born with severe special needs, I can either look at my children who are the beloved of God and who are broken, okay, in their physicality, in their physical nature, they're broken. okay? They have to have surgeries. They have to go to the doctor often. And I can say, God, make them whole. God, make them whole. And to pray for healing is not a bad thing, okay? But I'm just saying, I can be so fixated on that. I miss the opportunity every day for blessing to flow into them and through them to a world desperately in need of love, desperate to be loved. We're the beloved, broken, so God can be given to a world desperate to be loved. Thank you.